It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. Senate Republicans say they now have the votes for what would be a historic tax bill. And it would be historic for many reasons. It's been called the largest ever transfer of wealth to the very top in US history. And it's also been called the largest ever US tax increase. That's because while corporations and millionaires will benefit the most, some 24% of the country would see their taxes actually go up. And all told, the measure would add $1 trillion dollars to the federal deficit. I'm joined now by James Henry, investigative economist and lawyer, senior advisor at the Tax Justice Network. So, James, by the time many people see this interview, it's quite likely that this tax bill will already have passed. If so, what have the Republicans done here?
Well, we don't know in particular because they're still writing the damn thing. I mean, this is Friday evening, and you're probably going to run this on Saturday after they pass it or don't pass it. But they're literally still making it up. In fact, Senator McCaskill of Missouri, to find out what is in the final bill, had to go to a K Street lobbyist. And the lobbyists on K Street in Washington are notorious for writing these bills. And she came up with a long list of about 30 amendments that they were proposing that the Democrats have never been told about. This whole thing has been written in secret. There have been no hearings. It's the largest tax bill in 30 years. And yet, you know, you can smell a rat here because of the way the Republicans are going about this. Holding negotiating sessions with their own Senator Corker on the floor of the Senate, sticking in provisions at the last minute to favor parochial school tuition. It's just a comedy if it wasn't so sad. This is indeed one of the largest wealth transfers to the top 5% of the country. As far as we know at this point, first of all, the bill provides for a deep reduction in the corporate nominal income tax rate from 35% to 20%. Most big companies don't pay that. They have a lot of their assets offshore. But they're going to be able to continue to play offshore tax games, and many of them are going to benefit substantially from the reduction in tax that applies to the $2 trillion offshore that they're going to try to bring back. Secondly, this does nothing about a host of problems we've identified, like carried interest. Does nothing to really upgrade the quality of tax enforcement. It continues what's called the pass-through treatment and expands that tax treatment for many businesses and individuals. So on the whole, the analysis that we've been able to do so far, and this is going to literally take weeks to redo this after we get the final details, shows that at least 70% of the benefits of this bill go to the top 5%, basically the donors to the Republican Party.
Right. The number I saw from the Tax Policy Center was 80% of the benefits go to the top 1%. And what about the middle and lower classes? How is it that what's billed as a $1.5 trillion tax cut will actually increase taxes for so many people?
Well, first of all, the tax rates for individuals will be phased out. Any changes in those tax rates for individuals will be phased out after 2025. After which they will begin to go up. And because we expect to see $1 trillion in added debt from this bill, they certainly will have occasion to do so. Second, just the way the bill is written, there are a lot of deductions like mortgage interest and the state and local income taxes that many middle-class people take advantage of. And we just don't know how those will work out, but it's quite possible and quite likely that the actual after-tax effects for millions of individuals will be negative. So, what is absolutely clear is that the beneficiaries of this bill are mainly, the top 1%.
Can you give us some micro examples of how, say, a lower or middle class person could be impacted? I mean, I've seen people just in my Twitter feed complaining about what this means for them, especially freelance workers, people who work from home, talking about how deductions that they rely on are going to go, and what the income that they take home is going to be way less than it is now.
Well, this is going to affect lots of people in very, very different ways, depending on their situations, because it basically gets rid of a lot of the itemized deductions that people have been able to count on for self-employment. In the interest of supposedly standardizing the income tax, that's going to introduce a lot more kind of inequality into the tax system. And it is going to affect many middle-class people who are working as independent contractors. Secondly, one of the big things that they're doing here is repealing the Obamacare charge on Obama. That's going to affect millions of Americans who have been counting on Obamacare. They're going to see their health insurance rates rise. If they're going to pay for this thing without increasing the debt, they're going to have to cut Medicare. There's a talk about a $300 billion reduction in Medicare. So, this is going to really impact a lot of ordinary Americans. The only ones who can really count on benefiting from the bill are the people who are supporting the K Street lobbyists, the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, the big major multinationals who are going to get a one-day tax cut on their offshore wealth that they've stashed, and also many other multinationals, and Wall Street, which is, we've seen Wall Street stock rise just this week in response. The major banks here are going to have a tax holiday.
James, it's been amazing for me to watch just how Republicans aren't making much of an effort to hide that fact. I mean, there's that famous quote from Senator Lindsey Graham, the Republican, where he said that if we don't pass this tax reform, the financial contributions will stop.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty blatant. I think they're worried about running out of time because they're facing the November 2018 elections. They have a president who, to say the least, as we saw today's news on Flynn, makes it clear, is in trouble. And they want to be able to say to their donors, at least we did something during the last 2 years. So, this is a very unpopular bill. At least 62% of the American people are opposed to this tax plan, even before they know what's in it. They know enough about it to know that it stinks, and they've seen the process being worked behind closed doors. And there's every indication that the people who are writing this bill do not have their interests at heart. We're in an economy where we already have pretty full employment. Most of the economists I talk to don't expect this to accelerate growth very much, if at all. In fact, the idea of paying for tax cuts for the rich with federal borrowing or deep spending cuts for the poor and the middle class is just the opposite of what you'd like to do if you want to stimulate the economy. So all things considered, this is a horrific bill that can only be explained by the fact that the people writing it are representing not us, but their donors.
James, this is a tangent, but just briefly, when you say that economists widely believe we have full employment, the unemployment rate is pretty low, but isn't it also true that that figure does not account for all the people who simply just stopped looking for work?
It does, and there are efforts to take account of that. I think even when you make those adjustments and look at people who have dropped out of the labor force for economic reasons, those numbers are still quite low compared to where they were. It's not satisfactory by any means, but compared with where we were over the last decade or so, under the Obama administration, I think it's fair to say the employment and job situation improved considerably, and it has continued to do so during this first year of the Trump administration. So I don't think anyone denies that the economy is operating at a pretty tight rate. We don't see inflation rising yet. But no one's making the case we need tax cuts in order to stimulate economic growth, except these Republican donors.
Okay, right. So then two questions then. The first is, so even assuming that this bill passes tonight, when do you think we'll actually know the full extent of what's in it? And also, if there have been economic gains in recent years, certainly we have rebounded from the worst of the financial crisis, although not totally, obviously. Do you think that this tax bill is seismic enough to undo whatever benefits have happened in the past few years?
Well, it's going to hurt some very specific people very hard. I think low-income people who are counting on health insurance, elderly people are going to see some tax rates increase for odd reasons. They're big users of the state and local deductions, and many people who live in places like New York or relatively high tax states that are high tax for good reason. We tend to take care of people better than states that don't use taxes or have progressive taxation. But I think it'll take some time to know exactly what's in the bill, because the next stage, they have to reconcile this Senate bill with whatever is in the House bill. And it's not clear that they're going to be any more open about that negotiation over the next few weeks than they have been up to now. So I think by the time we get to see what's actually been done to us, it'll be some way down the road. But there'll be plenty of time for us to do the detailed analysis that's required. And I'm a betting man. I believe that the odds are, when we do the numbers, we'll find out, if anything, it's even worse than we suspect right now. And that's in a way good news for the progressives in the November 2018 election, because I think what we can try to ensure is that this is the last time the Republican Party is ever able to do this to the American people.
James Henry, investigative economist and attorney, also senior policy advisor with the Tax Justice Network. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.